Hello everyone, in the previous video we saw how to install and set up a Django project. In this tutorial we are going to set up our first application. We are going to name it players. This will handle the logic of our player side. Eventually we will create an application to handle the user's logic, and we'll also set up our Postgres database. So at the beginning I said that I'm using Linux for this tutorial, but if you're not using Linux, you are in Mac or Windows, you can use these links to install your Postgres database. After installing your Postgres database, we can then proceed to create our database and our users that we'll use to write operations to our database. So if you're on Linux, you can use this command sudo postgres psql. This will give you access to the SQL shell that you can run your commands. So the first step is to create our database. So create database. I'm going to name it DjangoDB. We'll also create our user. Create user, Django user with password, testing 321. Always remember the semicolon. Then we need to grant privileges to our Django users on our database. So grant all privileges on database. This is the DjangoDB to our user, Django user. Then we need to enable our user to create databases. So alter user, Django user, create DB. And that's it. So as you can see in our settings file, the default database is SQLite3. We are going to overwrite this and use Postgres. So according to the documentation, the Django documentation, this is how you configure your Postgres SQL database. So we can just copy this. We have the engine, the name, the user, the password, the host, and the port. This is simply localhost. The name of our database was DjangoDB. Our user was Django user. The password was testing 321. The locals and the port should remain the same. Before we test this, we need to install an adapter that will enable Django to communicate with our Postgres database. We're going to use this adapter. So pip install that. After installing it, we can test it by running our server. So Python manage.py run server. So as you can see, it's running correctly. Our Postgres database is set up well. If this hasn't worked for you for any reason, you can proceed by using the SQLite3 database. If it has worked, you can just delete it. So I'm going to delete this SQLite3 database. Yes, I want to delete it. And for now, I'm just going to close our server. Then with the new database created, we can run our migrations. So Python manage.py migrate. that will apply our migrations to the new Postgres database. The next step is to create our first application. I'm going to call it players. So python manage.py startup, let's call it players. So this command will create our first app, which is called players. It will create a directory for players where we'll have our admin, apps, models files, the tests, and the view files. So we also need to register our app in our settings.py file, where we have the installed app settings. We're just going to list our players app. So players.apps.playersconfig. We can also register our third-party apps, which is the REST framework. Third-party. The REST framework. So that will register our application, and in the next video we are going to create the models and the views, and we'll see how you can interact with the data in real time. I have a JSON data file that we are going to use for that. As you can see, we have the player names, the ID, the jersey number, citizenship data, citizenship flag, other positions, and agency info, club stats, the club stats, national team stats, current season stats, and I'm going to share the data for 152 players. I'm not going to share the full data of all players. I'm going to share only 152 players. If you want the full data, which consists of over 166,000 players, there'll be a link in the description of how you can get it. But that's for the next video, where we're going to set up our models and see how you can create the endpoints to interact with our database. So that's it for this video. See you in the next.